Thanks for waking up with us.
How you doing, everybody? Welcome back to Stand Focused for Jesus. Hope each and every one of you are having a blessed day in the Lord Jesus Christ, as always. So it's been a while since I talked about this stuff: biotechnology, nanotechnology, um, DNA manipulation, stuff like that. But this is a video that I came across a while ago, and I just got around to listening to it. And the guy had some pretty interesting things to say. Matter of fact, some very, very interesting things to say. Now, most of you know I have a variety, a plethora, a buffet of videos that you can watch dealing with this topic. Um, so what I want to do is we're going to listen to what he's saying, and then when he makes certain points, I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to chime in. People wonder, like, hey man, where you get this from? Where you get that from? Well, a lot of it, obviously, all of it comes from being led by the Spirit of God. But in regards to just getting basic wisdom and showing you from their perspective what they are trying to do, it's from stuff like this. The videos that seem to be boring, the 49-minute video of somebody sitting there talking about stuff that most people probably think is irrelevant to their lives. This is why I get a lot of this stuff from watching these seminars and everything where these people talk. They get in front of their own people and they talk. We call it doing recon. When you're in the military, you have your communications officers, your intelligence officers. Their job is to what? To gather intel and to relay it to who needs to be relayed to. So this is what we're doing right now. We're gathering intel. We're doing recon like Caleb. So that being said, let's go ahead and get into it.
Okay, I'm going to start off by just apologizing because I find that people look at this bio-nano stuff as really, really spooky and scary. And so I'm just going to say in advance, I'm sorry, that's my Canadian side. You're not going to like all of this, but it will be a great conversation starter moving forward. The reason why so much of this is spooky is because it is unfamiliar to us. Now, I want to give you a little taste of why it's unfamiliar. We've always had the stars. We've always been able to see it as long as we've been human beings. But looking down is really new. It's only about 400 years old that we started to make microscopes. Before that, we had absolutely no idea there were things smaller than the naked eye.
According to, you got to understand, when they're speaking, they're not really speaking from our perspective. They're not really speaking from our perspective. And I apologize if you hear some noise in the background. I am in my vehicle, so I got the AC going, and I may turn it off, so you may hear that. You may hear me let the windows down and everything, or crank my vehicle back up. But they're speaking from their perspective. Now, I showed you before where in ancient Egypt they had a hieroglyph, hieroglyph, a pictograph of sperm. Yet they allegedly didn't have the microscope. So again, when they're talking, when they're saying certain things, they're speaking from their perspective. Because a lot of this about DNA, this is ancient knowledge. It's always been about the manipulation of DNA. But ultimately, it's always been about the manipulation of the Word of God, because that's the real DNA. The code of life is God Himself. He is the code. So let's go.
I could see. And trust me, it is a crazy world. This is just a couple of drops of pond water under a microscope. There are creatures there that you can barely imagine. The oceans are filled with these creatures. It is truly an alien world, the microscopic. Now, just to give you a sense of
Now, see, people talk about faith, they mock faith, but as I explained to you before, faith, I know the Bible says faith is the substance of things not seen, but it also says what? The evidence of things hoped for. So even though you cannot see it, you still believe that it's there. You believe so much because you know it's there. If you don't got a microscope, if you don't have the right equipment, you can't see that microscopic world. But it's a world within the world. As I talked about before, macrocosm and microcosm. It's a world within the world. But you can't see it with the naked eye. But you believe, you have faith that it's there. So it's not a matter of, oh my God, this is blind faith. We don't know where we're going, because the Bible tells us that faith comes by hearing, hearing by the word of God. So we have faith, and we having hope in what we can't see, yet we know it's there. Are we walking blindly? No, because the Bible speaks against that. We are not the blind leading the blind. So even though you can't see faith in the way that you can see what's right in front of you, it's simply a matter of you can't see it right then. You can't see Christ right now, but you know that Christ is in heaven sitting on the throne. And you know what? Eventually, you're going to see him. That is your hope. So we're not dealing with blind faith. Faith can be seen. We just can't see certain aspects of our faith right now.
scale. These are things you can see with your eye. I love this visualization because you start to move in. You start to see, quickly go beyond the resolution of the human eye and start to go into the bigger cells like the amoeba, which you might remember from biology, the paramecium, some of the larger cells like the human egg. Then you start moving into the smaller scales. This is a micron scale. This is bacteria, mitochondria that powers our cells. And now you start moving into the nanoscale, the viruses, and ultimately the subcellular components.
So notice he mentions nano. So viruses are considered nano. So when we're talking about nanotechnology, we're talking about they taking things from the nano world and implementing technology, merging technology in that world. Technology, the study of, is a study of knowledge. We've covered that in many of our sermons.
That make up all living systems. This is an alien world with alien physics. We're not used to seeing it in our everyday lives. Why look at small things? We build some of the biggest machines in the world to look at the smallest particles because they teach us about the universe that we live in. We study the elements to give us a foundation in chemistry and geology that helps us better understand the solar systems and the universe that we live in, our local universe. When you start moving into the micron scale and the nanoscale, you start to be able to work with new domains and physics that just don't really apply at any other scale. This stuff is almost magic. And I just want to point out, here are some nanoparticles that we've been able to engineer over the last few years. This is really the part about nanotechnology that I'll go into, and that's about it. But I also want to point out that these nanoscale particles between 1 and 100 nanometers is also where most of the subcellular components in living systems also fit. Cells are much larger. You can see they're on the micron scale, but the components of cells are down at the same size as some of these nanoparticles. We study these because they teach us about this, the living world that we inhabit. This is a living world, and it's all powered.
You hear me say this all the time. To understand the bigger picture, you must first understand the small things. Because the bigger world, the bigger picture is made up of the smaller pieces. So they're studying the smaller pieces so they can get a better understanding of the bigger picture. They're studying the DNA, because this is what it boils down to, DNA and changing the DNA and stuff like that, as you will see. They're studying these different things because once they study it and they understand it, then they can change it and the big picture can come together as one complete picture and now there's a jumbled up piece of mess with no what I'm saying, with that nobody can comprehend.
By these systems. So when you see an astronaut or someone looking into a microscope, they're really doing the same thing. They're exploring new frontiers. And granted, being an astronaut is a lot more exciting, and that's because rockets occasionally blow up. That doesn't happen so much in biology labs, we hope. But it is really an act of exploration, and we are very early in these explorations, both to space and into studying the small. There's a lot of value to it because today, as you know, all of our computers are powered by nanotechnology. The features on a semiconductor chip now are 7 nanometers. That's about 3 DNA strands stacked side by side. It's hard to imagine the scale of that. But the folks working in the semiconductor industry have been working at this level for over a decade. We're starting to see nano.
Now, did you hear what he said? He said they've been working on this for over a decade. Nanotechnology, nanoparticles. You know what I'm saying? All they're doing is they're taking the physical world, the physical things, unseen that most of us can't see, and they're mimicking it on a larger scale. The computer chips and stuff like that that are in your cell phones, using the nanotechnology and whatever else that they have implemented. So the technology that they present to the general public, they are, as we say, light years ahead of what the general public knows about. For example, when people argue about, oh, the moon landing and this, and you know, how did we contact the people that was in space with with this telephone? Well, that's what they told the general public. They couldn't let you know what type of technology that they already had their hands on that they were using. And then later, you start to see this technology and stuff like that. But they got to make it seem like, yeah, we're not as advanced because if they put out what they really have, then most people are not going to be able to handle it. And remember, all this is going on. It's a step by step implementation to ultimately lead people up to accept and receive the mark of the beast, which a major part of the mark of the beast deals with technology. That's why they're trying to, as I say, merge the man with the machine. The problem isn't the technology. The problem is they're using technology in a devious way. That's the problem.
Particles come into play with things like quantum dots, which were fascinating little particles that today are being used to make televisions. as well as other types of diagnostics. In fact, nanotechnology is pretty much pervasive in the world. Germany is a leader in it, according to the briefing documents that I had. I am not an expert, so I won't try and elaborate on that, but just know that the nanoscale has always been important. Biologically, nanoscale structures have been fascinating for a long time too. A gecko's foot has nanostructures that allow it to stick to almost any surface through hydrogen bonding. How does it make that? And how does a living cell operate? These are the most amazing machines to me because one makes two, two make four, and it does this all using elemental materials. Elemental. This is nanotechnology in action, doing things that our nanotechnologies, the one we've been building, can only dream of. And this has been happening for billions of years on this planet. Now, we know how it works, sort of. This is basic biology. You take a human, you pluck out a cell, you pull out its genome, there's its chromosomes, you unravel the chromosomes, you get a long string of DNA. DNA is transcribed into RNA, the working copy of the nucleic acids, which ultimately are translated into proteins, which build us and every living thing on this planet. Biology 101 in 2 seconds. This is the reason why I love biology, though. Biology is self-assembling nanotechnology with a built-in programming language. No other nanotechnology has this. This is really important. Now, we didn't know much about this code for a long time. I remember before, in the early 1980s, just to read a few hundred bases of genetic code was enough to get your PhD. But by 1990, the Human Genome Project had officially started up after about 5 or 6 years of behind-the-scenes wrangling and getting money and politics. And this project catalyzed an amazing shift in genomics that continues to this day. It went from doing DNA sequencing like this, using X-ray film and radioactive isotopes and reading DNA code by hand, to factories that churn out DNA 24/7 using robotic sequencers like these HiSeqs made by Illumina.
Did you hear what he said? See, this is why I listen to this stuff. Did you just hear what the man said? He said they got factories that are robotic based, that they churn out DNA 24/7. Let's go back. Let's go back.
Factories that it went from doing DNA sequencing like this, using X-ray film and radioactive isotopes and reading DNA code by hand, to factories that churn out DNA 24/7 using robotic sequencers like these.
And then the name of the company is Illumina. Yes, like illuminate. You think that's by accident? They got, I want to say that one more time. They got factories that are making DNA, replicating DNA, breaking down DNA 24/7. Not 24/7, 24/7. 24/7. Think about that. Think about that.
HiSeqs made by Illumina. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke with the CEO of Illumina, and I said, give me a little heads up on what's coming. And he said, well, we've got our new NovaSeq sequencers coming out. This is essentially a smaller, faster version of the current sequencers that he claims will be able to do a human genome for $100. You saw today, or you heard earlier today, this incredible advancement in DNA sequencing technology, going from billions of dollars to now hundreds of dollars to do a human genome. That's great, but it also opens up reading the code of all living things. This isn't just about humans.
So the human genome deals with reading the code of the human, what we call human DNA sequencing and everything, because it has to be in a certain sequence. So they can break down that sequence and they can go in there and they can change it. They got to be able to read it. Once they understand how to read it and what connects with what, then they can go in there and then they can change it. If they can change it, then they can go in there and say, okay, this person is predisposed to this or that or that or that or that. Now we can go in there, we can edit the DNA so that they won't get this or won't get that for a certain cost, of course. So, if we just go with the theory of it, you could technically live forever because what kills us, disease and these different things, they cause our body to oxidize more and more, faster and faster, speeds up the inflammation and these different things on our body. So we ultimately end up dying. The body decays. But if you can slow the process down so fast, slow it down so fast, I mean, slow down the aging process because we age pretty fast in comparison to back in the day. If you can slow that process down, then you can technically live forever because you done bought yourself another 200, 300, 400 years or whatever. Because you can go get another organ, or you're not age. You know what I'm saying? The rate that you age at isn't what it is now. So you 1,000 years old, but you really only 30 years old or something like that. I mean, I'm just saying. So then you have all this time to come up with better technology, to dig deeper into understanding the DNA and these different things to make yourself live even longer.
And the technology continues to advance. About a $500 million worth of investment went into making this little device, the Oxford Nanopore MinION sequencer. This is actually a hybrid chip. It's basically a cyborg. It's part biological, part semiconductor. And
Excuse me, y'all. It's a cyborg chip. I know that a lot of y'all like to talk about the microchips and stuff like that. That's only the beginning. He said it's mixed. They merged something biological living with something non-biological. Think about that. This ain't, as we say, this ain't sci-fi. And believe you me, I'm a sci-fi guy because I grew up on sci-fi. When everybody else was watching, you know what I'm saying, cartoons and stuff like that, I was watching sci-fi movies with my mama. Especially when they used to have the marathons and stuff like that. I would sit there all day and watch those movies. And it's crazy because they always intrigued me. Because even though they were quote unquote sci-fi, in my spirit, I felt like that a lot of that stuff was real. And lo and behold, like a lot of the stuff that they now have that was in the sci-fi movies is real. It's real. The stuff that I grew up on looking at with the sci-fi movies and everything, I'm now like, dang, I remember watching that on the movie. I remember watching that on this sci-fi movie or that sci-fi movie. And now they're doing that. What I didn't realize was that that was a seed that God had planted in me because he knew what I was going to be preaching about right now in 2021. So, y'all give me a second. Let me turn this vehicle back on, get some AC. Getting kind of toasty up in here. All right, let's roll. Thank you for your patience.
Works simply by having a pore that allows DNA to go through and you read the electrical signals right off of it. It costs $1,000 to buy this device, and you throw away the chip inside and replace it. This allows you to do DNA sequencing in the field. It also allows you to do it in space. Just last year in the summer was the first time DNA had ever been sequenced on the space station. We're still learning how to unlock the secrets of life through DNA code with our technologies. This is just the start.
Did you hear what he
And as you
said?
heard,
Pause it. Let's go back.
the secrets of life through DNA. Just last year in the summer was the first time DNA had ever been sequenced on the space station. We're still learning how to unlock the secrets of life through DNA code.
We are still learning how to unlock the secrets of life in the DNA code. What does the Bible tell us? The Bible tells us that life is in the blood. Blood is water. Do you see what's going on? We want to unlock the secrets of life through DNA.
With our technologies. This is just the start. And as you heard earlier today, now we're able to take a drop of blood and we're able not only to get a full genome, we're also able to look for mutations, cancer cells, other infections, parasites, just from a single drop of blood. Now remember, every baby that's born gets a heel prick and is tested for metabolic errors that could essentially kill them. We've been doing this in North America, I'm sure it's done here, for over 60 years. Every baby gets a drop of blood. How much longer will it be until we do a...
How many babies have been born in those 60 years since they said they've been doing it? So what are they doing with those drops of blood that they're collecting from those babies? They got them on file somewhere, and they get a DNA sequenced, and they can tell a lot about you, pretty much everything about you, through that DNA. They can know more about you before you find out about yourself. That's some powerful information, because then they can leverage it and manipulate it. Because then, hey, this person is more likely to be uh uh susceptible to this. Just like when they put the ads in front of you after something you just looked at on Facebook or eBay or Amazon, then you get an ad for it. They're trying to entice you to go ahead and buy it.
Whole genome sequencing on every baby. DNA diagnostics are changing everything about
Grail.
medicine. This company, which was essentially spun out of Illumina, the sequencing company, has raised, it's only 2 years old, it's raised over $1 billion in financing, and just a couple of weeks ago, they announced a 120,000 person multi-center clinical trial to look for cancer markers in blood. That's remarkable. Companies doing clinical trials larger than any medical center could ever do. And this is just the start. Why is this important? Well, it's because we can't scale these things. An MRI is great for finding cancer once it's a certain size, a few millimeters. But you can find a few hundred cells that have gone cancerous with DNA sequencing technology. We've just started to tap into the power of this tool. How do we integrate all that? One of the companies at the forefront of this space, Health Nucleus, is starting to build avatars, starting to collect this data and
Starting to build avatar. This Some of y'all remember the movie Avatar. Go look up what an avatar actually is. This is not just something that we talking about that's sci-fi. Like, oh man, you conspiracy theorist. Yeah, I am a conspiracy theorist. Go look up conspiracy. Go look up conspiracy in the Bible. They are conspiring, and I have a theory that they are conspiring. And my theory, because that's how you use it in the scientific world, you have a theory, then you have to prove your theory is right. So people that are talking about conspiracy theory, they don't even understand the definition of the dang word they're using. I have a theory that they are conspiring to do evil under the guise of doing good. So, yes, I am a conspiracy theorist. And my theories continue to be proven true through the word of God. Excuse me. So, they're building avatars. Avatars. And then they put it in the movies to get the people to watch it and condition them. So, when it happens, then the programming is already there. So, then they just activate the programming. That way, the people won't kick against it so hard.
Build a digital representation of the human being, a full MRI scan, microbiome scan, genome scan, consult. And apparently about 20% of the people that go through this process, which is very expensive, 25,000 to 50,000 US dollars, about 20% of the people that go through it find some actionable medical need. How quickly can we make this type of technology cheap and available for everyone? Well, another company that I've been watching in China is trying to do that. iCarbonX is founded by the former head of BGI, the Beijing Genomics Institute, that is really the world's sequencing powerhouse. So we can already see the convergence of DNA sequencing technology and artificial intelligence for analysis at a price point that's going to be very different than Health Nucleus. But I don't think that's the end of it either. In fact, a couple weeks ago, I made a bet with this fellow. This is Gary Wolf. He's one of the founders of something called the Quantified Self Movement. People interested in measuring different aspects of themselves. And I made a bet, $1,000, that within 5 years, there will be a company that will offer free genome sequencing to everyone and will have at least 1 million members in their databases. Now, if I said to you, I will sequence your genome for free and give you all of this information for free and control over your data, how many of you would get your genome sequenced right now? About 45%, maybe 40. Now, it's different. If it's with a younger audience, it's 85%. The older the audience, the fewer people are comfortable with this technology. And that's because it is one of the most powerful data sets. But today, it's fragmented. You're not even allowed to access it on your own in many states in the United States. I don't know how it is in your country. Even now, if you want to get your DNA sequenced, you often have to go through a doctor. This is your code. I tried to have my daughter sequenced. She's 2 years old. I can't get it done. Here is the most powerful predictive test in medicine, and I cannot get my daughter sequenced in the United States. This needs to change. Gary said, no way there will be a company that does this in 5 years, but I'm almost certain to win, because if one doesn't appear, screw it, I'll go make it. Right now, the problem is trying to aggregate all this data and make sense of it. This is a 5-year-old model of a bacterium called Mycoplasma. It was made by researchers at Stanford University, and when it was published 5 years ago, it was described as audacious because it collected all of this information about the bacterium's metabolism and put it into a MATLAB model and did some visualizations to kind of predict its metabolism. This is still the most sophisticated model of a living organism we have to date that I can show you. And it's pretty crude, because this is what your
That he can
kids
show.
are seeing as models with their video games running on PlayStations or Xboxes. These are completely simulated environments. Why can't we make a simulated cell that has this type of resolution and interaction and engagement? We need to fundamentally rethink the way we're doing cell biology. But that's reading and analysis of this information. The really fun part, and this is where you might find it spooky, is when you start actually writing genetic code. This is not genetic engineering as you've thought about it in the past. This is more like software engineering. This is when you sit down and you go, I want to make something. Here's my design. How do I go and put it together using?
When they get to play God without God. You see how excited he got when he got to this point. Oh, get it, I get to be the math scientist. It was the feminine self. These are the people that are leading the world.
This incredible new tool of life and the code that powers it all. And by the way, if you guys work with computers, you know how weird it is, that how many languages you need to know, how many protocols you need to have, how many libraries you need to install. With life, there is one code. And it's pretty much universal from bacteria all the way to us and everything in between. And once you get adept at it, it's really simple to figure out. Let's just say that AI is going to make a massive difference here. Now, in the last
What did he just say? He said, let's just say that AI is going to make a massive difference in what? In being able to take that DNA code and create, he tried to be slick with design something that you want to design. Make your own creation. Literally.
decade or so, we've created a new branch to the tree of life called Synthetica. It's a horrible name. Let's just call it intentional design. And we only have 3 basic tools to start working in this medium. One of them is evolution.
We don't buy that.
Straightforward. The second one is
listening.
editing, making small changes to a large existing genome. And the third one is actual design, when you start from scratch and you build from the bottom up. Now, I want to play this little video for you. It's the only one I have with sound. But this describes evolution because most people have no clue how evolution, how quickly it can work in these organisms.
So what we ended up building was basically a petri dish, except that it's 2 feet by 4 feet. And the way we set it up is that there are 9 bands, and at the base of each of these bands, we put a normal petri dish thick agar with different amounts of antibiotic. On the outside, there's no antibiotic. Just in from that, there's barely more than the E. coli can survive. Inside of that, there's 10 times as much, 100 times, and then finally the middle band has 1,000 times as much antibiotic. And then across the top of it, porous and thin agar that bacteria can move around in. The background is black because there's ink in it, and the bacteria appear as white. First, you see they spread in the area where there's no antibiotic, up until the point they can no longer survive. Then a mutant appears on the right. It's resistant to the antibiotic, it spreads, until it starts to compete with other mutants around it. When these mutants hit the next boundary, they too have to pause and develop new mutations to make it into 10 times as much antibiotic. And then you see the different mutants repeat this at 100. And after about 11 days, they finally make it into 1,000 times as much antibiotic as the wild type can survive. And so we can see by this process of accumulating successive mutations that bacteria, which are normally sensitive to an antibiotic, can evolve resistance to extremely high concentrations in a short period of time.
Isn't that
So if that's the case, then the same thing is going on with, you know what, that's going on right now. But it's still telling you to get, you know what?
remarkable? In just 11 days, you can evolve to use essentially an antibiotic as a food source. Now, these are very fast-growing organisms, but the principle works the same for all life. It's incredibly flexible.
If the principle works the same for all life, then that means that y'all false theory that the earth and we as mankind evolved over 1 billion years is bullshit. Y'all just proved, oh my God. If the bacteria grew that fast, then that means that they are proving, because God is the one that wrote the code for that bacteria to be able to do that, that God brought everything into existence in the time frame that he said he brought it into existence. Now, we don't know how old the universe and these different things they are. We don't know that. They could very well be billions of years and all these different things. We don't know that. But when they sit there and talk about that, oh, we evolved over this time period and that time period or whatever, that's false. Because when you have a increase in knowledge, you have exponential growth. That's why in the world that we live in, the powers that be, mostly here in America, they want to stunt the growth of specific groups of people by not giving them access to proper education, not giving them access to different type of technologies and stuff like that, because they know those people would exponentially grow on a subconscious level, on an intellectual level, on top of these people already growing exponentially on a physical level through sex procreation. So you can stunt the growth of a people by keeping knowledge, wisdom, and understanding from said group of people. And you can get a a great head start when you have access to certain knowledge, certain education, being able to play around with all these different things, get the money and everything, so you're able to take that money into and reinvest it in different sectors. So when somebody does rise up with the idea, you're already in position to either capitalize off of that idea, copy that idea, or simply take the idea or buy the person out or whatever.
And adaptive. And in fact, the process of evolution can be accelerated by using technology such as MAGE, which essentially automates and drives the process of evolution in an automated way.
And that's what he just told you. He said, he said what they call evolution can be sped up through technology, knowledge.
This is again from the Wyss Institute. But you guaranteed, if you don't know how to design something in life, you can drive it to a certain target. We're going to be doing this all.
The man dropping them gems, if you pay attention. He said, if you can't design something in life, if you can't create something, you can drive what is already created in a certain direction. Did you get that? You can drive a certain people in a certain direction to get them to do what you want them to do and get them where you want them to be. So you can get the result that you want.
over the world as we start to need organisms to meet new human requirements. Jumping ahead to editing, you've probably heard a lot of about CRISPR in the last 5 years. This is a tool that just popped up out of nowhere and allows us to do gene editing, genome editing, really fast, really cheap. It's basically copy-paste for DNA. Luhan.
What is it? It's basically copy and paste for DNA. Have you ever copied and pasted something on Facebook? That's what they're saying they're doing with the technology. They're able to do. I want you to really let that sink in. And the technology is only going to grow. CRISPR is the beginning. Just wait till they start showing you what they're really doing and what they really got going on.
Yang at eGenesis is one of the leaders in this field. She's been editing the pig genome to remove endogenous viruses and to humanize the pig so that one day we can have an unlimited supply of organs.
What are they doing? They're mixing the DNA as in the days of Noah, as in the days of Lot. They're mixing stuff that's not supposed to be mixed. We want to humanize the pig. We want to make the pig human so he can grow a human heart that's based off of somebody else's DNA, and we can go in and we can harness that pig, take that organ, and then give it to that person. So what are they going to do with the pig? They ain't just going to get rid of it. You best believe they'll sell it as some mixed hybrid meat. Oh, they already got stuff like that out there. Now guess what? You literally eating somebody else's DNA. Do you think these folk really gonna let the pig go to waste? Or any animal? It's crazy times that we're living in.
They raised $38 million recently. They're moving ahead very quickly with this work. But CRISPR has also been used to selectively kill cancer cells. There's a company in France I like called Eligo Biosciences that uses it to kill microbes. And we've also started the first human therapies with this technology.
We've also started the first human trials with this technology. I told y'all that in previous videos. They were going to start doing that. When they said they was going to start doing it, that was like, what, years ago? I said they're already doing it. So that if they're starting human trials, then what are they doing? They're editing the DNA of humans, of mankind. If your DNA gets changed in that way, then are you mankind? Certain things are out of our control. Because we know about chemtrails and all these different things. And how, that has an effect. It damages the DNA. So they're changing the DNA on that, on that aspect. Because you end up having DNA damage and it speeds up the process, which means it speeds up the death of a person. But we talking about going in and they changing it. Like you writing a book or something, you made a mistake, or you want to take out a whole paragraph and put something completely different. That's going to change the whole context of that paragraph, or maybe even change the whole context of the book.
But it's when you get to design that things get really interesting. This is when you really start building intentional creatures. Today we have companies.
Man, I don't mean to keep on pausing, but I do, because I told you he was going to tell you some good stuff. What did he say?
But it's when you get to design that things get really interesting. This is when you really start building intentional creatures.
This is when you really start building. He's telling you intentional what? Creatures. So when I talk about they're gonna be creating these creatures, and in the book of Daniel, where it talks about, what I'm saying, he serving and worshiping gods that the fathers didn't even know. They're creating their own gods.
Today we have companies like Twist, based out of the San Francisco area. They print DNA. They essentially have a 3D printer for the DNA molecule. So if you can design the genetic code, you can just print it and then install it into a living organism.
Oh my God. Come on now. I told you he going to tell you some good stuff. I want to go back and make sure you heard what he said.
Have a 3D printer for the DNA molecule. So if you can design the genetic code, you can just print it and then install it into a living organism.
You can design the DNA, print the DNA, and install it, inoculate it. Oh, did I say that? Inoculate it into a living organism. What y'all say about that axe that's going on right now? And they're using new technology, mRNA, DNA technology, nanoparticles. What y'all say about that? He said that you can design the DNA, print the DNA, and put it in a living organism. Oh my God.
The master of this is Craig Venter. He's been at the forefront of this field for longer than I can count. Last year, he published the design and synthesis of a minimal bacterial genome. This is a synthetic bacterial genome, stripped down racing car version. It's incredibly cool. This is the organism. It doesn't look like much. It kind of looks like something that might come out of your nose on a Kleenex. But it was built using engineering, design, build, test, computer-aided design of the genome, complete synthesis of.
Didn't I define in the previous video, previous sermon, about what engineering really is? Do y'all remember that? Go look up what engineering is. Engineering deals with building a war machine. That's the core of engineering. That's where the word comes from, an engine. Building something used for war. And interestingly, here we are in this flesh at war. We were engineered to fight against the enemy. That's why we're here. One of the main reasons why we're here.
The genome boot up in a bacterial cell. And even though this is a minimal bacterium, and it was built from scratch, 149 genes, 1/3 of the genome, is still uncharacterized. That's 149 potential PhD projects to figure out what these genes do. But this is the simplest living organism. This is why we have so much problem understanding life. We haven't done the basic homework. On the very forefront of genomics is the synthesis of the yeast genome. This was the cover of Science just a few weeks ago, March 10th, talking about synthetic yeast chromosomes. They're marching their way through them. They'll be done by the end of the year. Yeast is important because we have factories like this. This is the Tiger Brewery. They make yeast do some really awesome things, like make beer. Amyris uses the same technology to make feedstocks for manufacturing. This is a plant they have in Brazil. And a company in the Bay Area I like called Bolt Threads has taken genes from spiders and put them in yeast, and now they can make spider silk in bulk. Okay, you can buy a very expensive tie, but soon you're going to get this stuff in vast quantities. And of course, you're going to see some very, very interesting new beers come in the future. Because you can take any gene from any organism on the planet and put it into yeast. Yeast is an incredible machine.
So you can have some octopus yeast-based beer. Or you can take a fish, one of these fish that glow, or one of these creatures that glow. And you can put it in yeast, that DNA part that makes it glow, and now you drinking beer or whatever that glows. You don't think that people would buy that at a party? Everybody that drinking, they glowing, or the government end up using that technology. They be able to take excuse me, they're able to take a special light and put it on the person and see how much they've been drinking. Now they don't have to use the sobriety test. Oh, we know how much you've been drinking. Or they can take the finger and just prick it right there on the spot. Think it's a game. Man, what? Beer that glows in the dark? Come on now, you know folks would be buying that. And they would have a party based off of it. Clubs would go crazy. There go $1 billion idea right there. Glow in the dark beer. Glow in the dark alcohol.
Now, today I work with Autodesk. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. It's a 35-year-old software company that makes design software. Design, simulation, visualization. Usually you use it for building cars and airplanes and buildings. But we've had a bio-nano team for the last few years. By the way, most of the people, those video games I showed you are actually made with our software. Just about any special effect in any movie is made with our software. It's a really cool company to work with because all we make in
So they're talking about video game, they're talking about software, like the digital world and everything. And he's talking about biotechnology? That the video game companies are using these different things? So what are they really doing in the video games? What are they testing? What are they seeing?
of zeros, and we help people create. But we've been taking some of the things we've learned in things like 3D printing and modeling, et cetera, and we've been moving it to the molecular. And it's been really fun. So we've made molecule viewers. Here's just a screenshot of working with a large protein. This is really hard work when you have millions of atoms. And we've also built new genetic design tools that essentially allow you to mock up genomes very quickly, make new libraries, et cetera. I'm not saying we're the best company in the space. There's a lot of companies that have been here for a long time, but we're learning fast, and we bring some incredible capabilities in cloud computation, visualization, simulation to the table. Maybe one day our design softwares for life will look a lot like this. Maybe not. This is just an artist's conception, but it's where I'd like to see things go. Now, I use Autodesk tools to go after a problem that's been bugging me for a long time, which is cancer. Like, can't we cure this? It's just an antibiotic problem. Kill that cell, don't kill that one. And we've been making progress. We've got things like targeted drugs now, and we've got better detection. That's great. But you saw how quickly bacteria can develop resistance, and we know cancer cells can get resistance too. So we need to have a pipeline that produces a lot of new drugs to keep going after the resistant cells. And here's the problem with drug development. It's long and it's expensive. It takes 10 to 15 years to make a new drug, and it costs billions. And even in late stage,
It takes 10 to 15 years. It costs billions, but we're supposed to trust what's going on right now. Even though I don't care if it took them 10 to 15 years or it took them a year and they claim it's safe. I still ain't fooling with it. Now listen to what he says next.
there's an 80% failure rate. This is like the worst process ever for manufacturing.
There's an 80% failure rate on most drugs that they make. And these are the people that you trust.
Anything. I hate it. Most people don't know that the total number of drugs made since the inception of the FDA is still like under 1,600 drugs. And the only thing exponential about this is the price. The price goes up by a factor of 10 every 20 years consistently, but now we're topping out at $100,000 a month for the latest treatments. In other words, it's just unsustainable. So I've been working with Autodesk to essentially prototype a 3D printer for personalized cancer medicines. And when I say personalized, I mean to one person, like Zana and Bastian were talking about earlier today. Now, this may sound crazy, and I won't go into it, but there are so many advantages when you make drugs for one person. And you can look at these later, but the thing I like about it is you don't need big manufacturing plants, and it doesn't take
Drugs that are specifically tailored to your DNA. My.
long and expensive phase clinical trials. All the approvals are done before you start. So this shaves all the time and most of the money off of drug development. It de-risks it. Why haven't we done it before? It's just the technology wasn't viable. So it's still too crazy and too early to do this for human beings at scale. So we started working with dogs. We started prototyping, and my partner in crime here is a brilliant veterinarian by the name of Bruce Smith. He's a veterinary oncologist. They're kind of unicorns. There's only 300 of them in the United States, and he's the only one that I'm aware of that has a PhD in molecular biology and has actually made viruses to kill cancer cells. He's a wonderful man. And together we prototyped the synthetic production of something called canine adenovirus 2. It's a weak virus, but it had never been synthesized from scratch. It's the largest synthetic virus that's ever been made. We did this last year. It was successful. We made synthetic DNA, we booted it up in cell culture, we validated it against the natural virus. It's perfect. The only reason why we haven't treated a dog yet is because it's such a weak virus, the cancer cells it needs to grow on grow faster than the virus can infect them. We're fixing that now. But this is essentially a 3D printed cancer medicine. And it's only going to get better as we start to iterate this. This was the foundation of the company we just put together a few weeks ago to be able to drive this forward, where each animal treated is essentially a whole drug development program run at a cost that's going to get very quickly the equivalent of an off-the-shelf drug. My goal is to give better cancer treatment to dogs in the short term than people get. And eventually to miniaturize and computerize this whole process and build it into a pen, a drug company, and a stick that you can just throw in your glove box or your medicine cabinet and just download that medicine as you need it, as we were talking about this morning.
Download the medicine. He ain't just talking, y'all. This ain't a man that just, oh, I'm just talking about it. No. This is a man that is probably going to accomplish it, and probably accomplish even greater things in this regard than he even knows. FDA approved pen where you download the medicine into it and then inject yourself with it. Did you hear that? Download the medicine.
Now, this isn't just me, and it's not just drugs. This is an entire emerging industry of programmable nanotechnology. Since it started around 2000, it's really growing exponentially. The number, by any measurement, number of papers, number of participants. I've had the great pleasure of working with students over the last decade at a program called iGEM that was started at MIT and based on US First, the International Robotics Program. And I absolutely love working with these kids. These are kids that have never been in a lab before, they've grown up digital, and they do work that is PhD worthy by working in small teams and using these incredibly powerful genetic engineering tools that large pharma companies would have just done anything for a couple of decades ago. It's a real phase shift in biotechnology. We're starting to see an industry blossom. CB Insights tallied them up a few weeks ago. Over 60 different companies working in every area you can imagine biology touching: food and drink, consumer products, healthcare, industrial chemicals, fuels, platforms. There was over $1.3 billion invested in these companies by VCs last year alone.
Look at the type of money they're investing in this stuff. 1.3 billion here, 5 billion here, a couple billion here, a couple million here. Where's this money coming from? Taxpayers' dollars? These are companies. Oh, who is the number one consumers in the world? Go look it up.
My friends at MIT that helped get this stuff rolling went on and founded a company called Ginkgo Bioworks. It's one of the most successful. It's all robotic. Another company a little more recent is Zymergen. They're focusing on materials. Again, robots. You do not want people doing liquid management. If you can see the liquids that you're pipetting, you've got 1,000,000 times too much. And these robotic labs are now going cloud. This is a company called Transcriptic. It is a programmable laboratory in a shipping container. Eventually, it'll get smaller. It is so much fun doing this work because you can actually do state-of-the-art biotech from your living room. So what's the bottleneck? The bottleneck right now is DNA synthesis. You saw how quickly sequencing dropped in price. DNA synthesis has not had that acceleration yet. It is decreasing exponentially in cost, or depending on how you look at it, increasing exponentially in price performance, but it hasn't had that wicked acceleration that we saw with sequencing as next generation technologies came about. It's coming, though, very soon. The more DNA you can write, the longer you can write it, the more interesting stuff you can make. All the first generation biotech industry was limited to making very small constructs, mainly single proteins. With synthetic biology, you can start doing metabolic engineering. Now you can build pathways, not just single proteins. And what's still science fiction is being able to do large genomes, essentially write whole chromosomes or lots of chromosomes to build complex genomes like ours or the mouse. This is,
Make their
I
own humans. They're
expected we
already
would be
capable of
investing
doing
more
that.
in this clearly necessary core technology after the first genome project wrapped up in 2003. But by 2012, nothing had happened. And by 2015, still nothing had happened. And that's when I got pissed off and I shot my mouth off at a genome meeting. And I said, please, can we just start a new genome project and get the world's scientists focusing on building design tools and new synthesis technologies to go and address these important needs in genome engineering? And the result was something called GP Write, Genome Project Write, as opposed to Genome Project Read. It used to be HGP Write, Human Genome Project Write, but there was kind of a backlash. But humans are part of it. Now, I just want to say there's no synthetic babies here. Anyway,
Right.
I am really, really fortunate that I have some of the most amazing co-founders of this project. George Church, who was just recently voted to the Times 100 Most Influential People, the leader of the Yeast Genome Project, Jeff Buca, and Nancy Kelly, who has been a force of nature putting together big institutions like the New York Genome Center. Our next meeting is just next week. If any of you are interested in this stuff, register now. There's probably only a couple of spots left, but this is where you need to be if you're interested in building genomes. And again, there will be no synthetic babies. This is just being able to write large, complex genomes. And these meetings bring everyone together, the ethicists. They bring together the scientists. They bring together the policy folks. They bring together the funders. This is not about...
I didn't know he controlled all that to stop there from being synthetic babies. Even though he's going to tell you that his baby, his daughter that he referenced earlier is pretty much, you know, in my eyes, I would consider her synthetic.
any single project. You may have seen this last week. It could get a little weird in the future. If you don't want to go to New York, go to Singapore. SB7, Synthetic Biology 7. The first one was in 2003, is up and running in Singapore this summer. This brings together some of the most amazing people in science and technology. Registration is still open. Do consider it. Here's what I know to my very core.
This is where it gets interesting. He's gonna tell you some more interesting stuff that we've been studying. I've been telling you through the Spirit about carbon 12 with the 666. He finna tell you.
Silicon's done great things for the world, really great things, and will continue to do great things. But programming carbon-based computing systems is going to get even more exciting. And the difference is, it's because whatever we make when we program carbon, we become the parents of.
Whatever you make when you program with the carbon, you become the parents of. Meaning you become, what he's really saying, you become the God of. Because you created it. Because we know that carbon is one of, I think, if we recall correctly, the second most abundant element. The second most abundant element. We know that we are carbon based. We have covered this many, many, many times. And this is the reason why I cover these things in the prior sermons and we go over them again. So when I drop stuff like this, then you understand it, or you understand it a little bit better.
Whole new level of responsibility. And it means that we have to rethink just about everything that we're doing in biotech, in finance, in regulation, in business. It's all got to restart because this is such a powerful and universal technology.
Did you hear what he just said? He said it all has to restart. He said everything. He said when we start making these carbon-based creatures and beings and carbon-based computers, biological living computers, the stuff you see in sci-fi, you see, you just got a computer sitting on your desk, or you got a computer in your hand, your cell phone, or right in front of you, and you listen to the video. But what happens when that computer that you're using, that cell phone, is actually living, is a living organism? So instead of putting your cell phone in your pocket, you put your cell phone in your hand, and your cell phone, you know what I'm saying, merges with your hand and everything. And then when you want to use it, you think about it, and it forms itself back into a cell phone or whatever. Y'all think this is a game. You think I'm laughing. You think I'm joking. I ain't joking. This stuff is serious. He just said reset. He said everything got to reset. He said it's going to change everything. And what's coming? The great reset. The global reset. Nusara, Gusara, that we have discussed many times before.
You'll hear from Mark Goodman later today. Mark Goodman is one of my favorite people because he is so paranoid that the world is just going to blow up. But when we get together, we have a few shots. Well, he doesn't drink, but when I have a few shots, weird things happen, like articles about biohacking and hacking the president. I'm on some watch list somewhere. But we really, really need to think about biosecurity in a new way, because right now the biodetection systems for most pathogens are, it's you and me showing up at a hospital bleeding out of an orifice. I don't want that. So to go see Mark's talk tonight, seriously. Stay around, don't go home. So to kind of put a bow on all this, life is fully reusable and sustainable technology. As far as I know, it's the only fully reusable and sustainable technology on this planet. And damn it, we got to get good at it. Like we really, really do. Also, life is just so damn cool. Go Google octopi and watch the incredible things these things do. And just remember, every single organism, from the insects in your home, to the animals in your fields, to the kids sleeping upstairs, are all built from the same machinery. And we are unlocking the secrets of that machinery. Now, honestly, We're a little past our prime, most of us, in diving into this young. But I remember when the genome first started being read, it changed my life. And it has been the foundation of my career for over 30 years. I'm doing this synthetic biology stuff for my daughter.
Listen to what he
While
says.
I was on an airplane yesterday, she was in Disneyland. But this is a kid who was born, well, she was engineered. She was made in a lab in New York and born in California. She's bio-coastal. But
Did you just hear what he just said?
while I was on an airplane yesterday, she was in Disneyland. But this is a kid who was born, well, she was engineered. She was made in a lab in New York and born in California. She's bio-coastal. But
She was made in a lab. He said, this is his daughter. She was made in a lab in one place and then birthed somewhere else. One more time.
while I was on an airplane yesterday, she was in Disneyland. But this is a kid who was born, well, she was engineered. She was made in a lab in New York and born in California. She's bio.
She was made in a lab in New York and born in California. She was made in a lab. She was engineered to be the way that she is. But he's sitting there telling you, oh no, we're not using synthetic. We're not going to make synthetic babies and all this other stuff. So you creating a child in a lab through whatever DNA manipulation that you have used, because you just told all the business, that's supposed to be better than a synthetic child, a child that's based off of synthetic DNA. The problem isn't necessarily the synthetic DNA, is what they're doing with it. They don't have the authority to do that. Because technically we are all copies. You are original in regards to who you are, but you're a copy of your mom and your dad and your mom. You're a copy. Half of your daddy and half of your mama was copy, and then here you are. But it's a line that you don't cross. And we're getting to a point where they are crossing lines, and they have been crossing lines that they know they're not supposed to be crossing.
Coastal. But the future is our kids. And if we want to give them a world that is going to keep operating and meeting the needs of billions of people, honestly, I think we have to get really good at life technologies. Not to mention keep them healthier through their life.
It's for the kids. It's for the kids.
I'm going to give you a reading list, but just take a picture. Buy all these books. Read everything you can about synthetic biology and bio-nanotechnology, and even a little bit of computing, because if you don't know what an if-then-else statement is, then you're not going to feel real comfortable with some of the switches that we're putting into these genetic organisms. But just know that for whatever fear you have now, whatever comfortable with some of the switches that we're putting into these genetic organisms.
If then else, then you're not going to feel comfortable with some of the switches, something you can turn on and off, something you control. He's telling you what they're doing and what they're going to continue to do.
But just know that for whatever fear you have now, whatever reservations you may have, it's because you've never worked with this stuff before. Life is so natural. Life is typically made in our bedrooms or in our gardens and not in the labs. But life knows how to do life. And there's safeguards and checksums built into this whole system all the way down. You are just great, tasty food to microbes. Everything wants to eat you. We know how to do defense. And now putting a digital layer of defense on top of that, as Zaina and Bastian were talking, will only increase our security. It's going to be a really, really interesting couple of decades because the Genome Project Right is going to wrap up in 2026, which means that we're probably going to get large genomes for under $1,000 by then. And the reason why I can say that without laughing is because every cell in your body, all 50 trillion of them, write a human genome every time a cell divides. It's not about inventing the technology, it's about learning how to harness what already exists.
Boom.
On that note, thank you for your attention.
They don't have to necessarily create the technology. It's already there. They're just taking what God has done and then they're manipulating it in the way they want to manipulate it. They use it how they want to use it. Pretty smart. And no reason to reinvent the wheel. You know, tires, they work pretty good. You can improve on the wheel, and we have seen that. You got better technology tires where you got cars that go over 200 miles per hour. Now you try to go over 200 miles per hour with some buggy wheels and see what happens. But the concept of what we know as the wheel, it works. It's not so much the wheel, it's the movement that allows you to speed up. So it's that movement that creates that circle. So, yeah, I know this is kind of long, but y'all know how I do. I gotta break it down, gotta break it down, gotta break it down. So, like I told you before, like I told you earlier, I watch stuff like this and I sit here and I listen intently. I don't watch just, passively. You got it playing and everything. I'm like, if the children making too much noise, I'll leave or I tell them to be quiet. Because they will tell you what they're doing. And then you will see, dang, this is what Brother King was talking about. This is what Sister So and so was talking about, whoever. This is what God is telling us. But y'all worry about all the wrong things. You can't even have a conversation with most people about this. You can't even have a conversation with most professing believers about stuff like this. Then when it's too late, they want to come crying and hollering to you. So we need to get this knowledge, we need to get this wisdom, we need to get this understanding now. We need to get it now so we can warn people. So when you see these things happening and speeding up, then you know what's going on. So you know what to do, you know how to move. And you know to call people to repentance. Because this is what this is about. Calling people to repentance and believing the gospel. Showing them that the word of God is true. So with that being said, God bless each and every one of you in Jesus Christ's name. As always, stay focused for Jesus. Now you know the truth is not debated, it is declared.